Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to take you into the console and show you how you go about creating a direct connect connection. Now, as you can probably imagine, I'm not able to fully set up a DX connection for you in a hands-on lab. This is something that does take weeks to months, and it requires a lot of money, and it requires setting up connections in physical data centers. So I can't do that, but I can show you the steps and give you a pointer as to how you would go about doing it. It's really not that hard to actually get the connection into place in terms of what you do in the console. It's really then going to your data center provider, getting things set up on that end, having the cables back into your internal on-premises routers. Those are the steps where there's a bit more complexity and time. So let's have a look. In the AWS Management Console, what I'm going to do is just come up and search for Direct Connect, and it has its own console, so let's go there. Now what you'll see is it shows you here how it works. So you decide on a direct connect location and the connection size that you want. You create your connection request here in the management console. You then download something called a letter of authorization, an LOA, from the management console. Now that provides a bunch of information that's really useful to your data center provider. They need to know that because it gives them the port numbers to connect into and that kind of information. So I'll show you an example of one of those in a moment. You provide the LOA to an APN partner and ask them to establish the connection on your behalf. So this is where you're providing these details to the partner who has a connection in the data center, and they're able to then establish the cross connect from their equipment into the AWS equipment. Lastly, you will then configure the virtual interfaces to establish network connectivity. So these are your private and public VIFs that you're going to create. So on the left here, we can see we have connections. And if I click on connections, I've already got a couple that I created. So I'm going to show you those in a moment. Now, obviously, all I've done is just put in a request. So it's not going to cost me anything at this stage. But if I leave this too long, I think after 30 days, they start charging you. So I've actually got to get rid of this soon. I'm going to go in and create a connection just to show you. Now there's something called Classic, or there's a connection wizard. If you go to the connection wizard, you'll see here you actually get to choose things like the resiliency level. So you can say maximum resiliency. This is what I was showing you in the diagrams, where you now have multiple direct connect locations, you have multiple customer data center locations, and in each of those you have multiple routers. So very, very resilient. You've then got high resiliency, where you have multiple locations, but you don't have redundancy within those locations. And then you have dev test, where you still have a level of redundancy with redundant routers, but just one location for the direct connect location of one customer data center. So those are a few options. Let's go back to Classic as well. And here you can provide your information yourself. So let's just call that my DX connection. I can then choose a location. So for example, let's say you're in Los Angeles. You can find here you've got core site LA1 and you've got El Segundo. If you put in New York, we can see we have the core site NY1. Alternatively, I could put in Mumbai, and you can see we've got multiple locations in Mumbai as well. So you find your location. Let's just take an example here. I'm in Sydney, so I might choose global switch. And then I choose the port speed, 1 gigabit or 10 gigabits per second. And then for on-premises, you can connect through an AWS Direct Connect partner. And if I have that selected, then I have to choose the service provider. So we can see there's several service providers. Let's choose NextDC. And then I will create the connection. Now, when you do that, it will warn you that once the physical connection is set up and data's being transferred, you're going to get charged. Or alternatively, after 30 days from the point that you put this connection request in, you're going to get charged. So I wouldn't go and create this just in case you forget. So once we got it connected, in this case, I have some redundancy and I have two connections, and I can click on one of these and go to view details. And here you see a bit of information. So you can see a connection ID and name, the account, the region, the location, and it has a couple of tags attached to it. Now you can see that there's an action required up here. So what happened was they actually generated a support case, sent me an email, and the email had a link to the support case. And in that support case, they're asking for some more information about the data center. They want to know where I am in the data center, which floor, which room, that kind of thing. So they can then allocate the port accordingly. Now, when they do that, you'll then get the letter of authorization. And here's an example. I just found this on the internet. This is not one of mine. And you'll see in here that this is actually global switch as well, SY6. And importantly, you've got the rack, the patch panel, PP1, and then the port 1/2. So this is giving some information. You could then give this to your APN provider, or you give it to your data center if you have your own equipment in there, and they will then be able to help you with the cross connect into the AWS router. So that's it. Once you've got that information and you've sent that through and you've had the physical connection established, then you would then be able to come in and create your virtual interfaces. So you can come in here, create a virtual interface. You can choose private, public, or transit. We'll talk about transit a bit later on. A transit gateway provides an additional type of VIF, and we're going to look at that in this section. So you would choose private or public, give it a name, connect it to a specific connection. You can then choose the virtual interface owner to be your account or another account, and you can use something called Direct Connect Gateway. Again, that's coming up soon. We're going to do that in the next lesson. Or you connect to a virtual private gateway, and then you would select the virtual private gateway, you provide your VLAN tag and your BGP autonomous system number, your ASN. There are some additional settings. So down here, you've got the IP that you want to use, IPv4 or 6. You can supply the router peer IP, the Amazon router peer IP, and a BGP authentication key. You can enable jumbo frames if you need to use jumbo frames and add tags. So that's how you create a virtual interface. We then have the lags. So again, this is where you would then create a logical grouping of physical connections. So you create a single logical connection from multiple physical connections. And again, here you just go through this and you choose your existing connections or create new ones and give it a lag name and the number of connections. And you have to choose the minimum links. The minimum links is the number of links that must be available for the entire group to be up. So if you have 4 links and your minimum is 2, then you need at least 2 links to be up for the connection to be up. Otherwise, it will be in a failed state. Next, we have direct connect gateways. There's virtual private gateways and transit gateways. Now, you know about virtual private gateways. We've used those already. And the other 2 technologies are what we're going to cover in the next few lessons. So that's it for this lesson. And again, if you did end up creating a connection here, make sure you go in and delete these because you could end up paying for them otherwise. So that's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.